The last time I saw Callum and Missy McLeod was at the Northern Trust Bank. They must have been in town from Scotland for the holiday. I told Callum I wasn't even his biggest fan, but I just love sharing a story about his new job at St. Giles. It was good news and it was so much fun to share. Then Callum looked at me and said, "Well, and how are you, Stanley?" I was crestfallen. Missy and Callum witnessed my countenance fall from gladness to sadness. All I could do was stutter about how I was struggling with the transition. No one wants to be an object of pity. When it's time for me to die, I just want to wander off like Moses and die under a rock somewhere. I don't know if going to heaven will be like a trip to the Northern Trust Bank, but I want to arrive there with a big smile and some good news to share, because that's the best kind of reward, and you don't have to take it to the bank. Welcome. Welcome to Sunday Coffee Hour. I'm Stanley Smith. At Sunday Coffee Hour, we talk about everything and nothing. This Sunday, we talked about the new film, Oppenheimer, going to the Newberry Library Book Fair, and how no one seems to know what astigmatism is, even though most of us probably have one. The readings at Washington National Cathedral were from kings. It takes a wise and discerning mind to be king. But in a representational republic, we all need to agree to disagree. And from Romans, all things work for the good for those who love the Lord. If God is for us, no one can be against us, because nothing can separate us from God. And the gospel reading was about the kingdom of heaven and how it's like the free enterprise system, the modified free enterprise system. We can't be paid twice for doing something, but in the kingdom of heaven, we might be. The sermon at Washington National Cathedral was by Jan Cope. I love Jan. Jan preached about how nothing can separate us from God because he holds us in the hollow of his hand. Jan said that in Paul's time, as in our time, many people believe the world is dominated by cosmic forces, but this is not so. God is the only animating force. He dominates us with his love. We can move from believing to embodying this reality when we realize this. Jan quoted author David Bartlett, who said, "God is not about conquering us or forcing us to surrender. God conquers us by his very being, because he is the center of being." Our center is often occupied by our facts and knowledge, and sometimes with our political party. We put God way off there on the fringe. They say you can't win for losing, and we all want to exercise our free will. And at the same time, we want to be assured of an inheritance. We can't leverage our inheritance in this life and expect to receive it in the next. If we demand social justice in this life and receive it, well, then we've received our reward. At St. James Cathedral, the sermon was by Stephen Balke. It was St. James Day at St. James. Stephen explained that St. James was the first martyr of the Christian faith. He was put to death by Herod Hieronymus, and his remains are buried in far-off Spain, serving as the principal pilgrim destination for the Camino de Santiago. Because of this, St. James is the patron saint of pilgrims. Stephen shared the 5 habits of highly successful pilgrims, which include modeling good behavior, sharing a vision, being flexible, helping other pilgrims, and encouraging the heart. St. James is such a wildly unsuccessful place. Services are poorly attended, and like many churches, their future is unclear. The congregation is reminded on a regular basis that someday it's very likely that the building around them will collapse. It's not modeling good behavior, especially if you're in building operations. But if you're interested in the treasure in heaven part, well, then you're doing a pretty good job. St. James is not for everyone. The pews are too low and the floors are too high. Few people are there, but I am. I attended a seminar last week and the topic of the Civil War came up. I was reminded how in many ways we can see the reverberations of the Civil War still with us in our time. The tension between self-autonomy and being dominated, being assured of inheritance and wanting to have it now. Both sides were agreeing to disagree, one by seceding and one by conquering the other. Operationally, that had some form of success built in if you're the conqueror, but it also had lasting ramifications. The concept of noblesse oblige rests on the idea that God has claimed us by his good grace, and we in turn accept others with the same grace. It's not our place to judge since we ourselves have not been judged. None of us want to be the object of pity. We'd rather wander off and die somewhere because we're all needy and ashamed. In our time, being needy and ashamed has been leveraged into a kind of indictment against God. If we've been promised something, social justice tells us we should demand it now. Waiting for an inheritance is repugnant, and we're highly offended by it. God has been replaced in the center of our life by facts and figures, and we're offended that we have to wait for anything, let alone an inheritance. Why do we need an inheritance if social justice tells us we're entitled to it in the first place? We all have our filter, which influences our perception of reality. Our filter consists of a small circle of what we know and the facts of our lives. Around that is a slightly larger circle of our beliefs. And everything else outside of the circles, well, that's an opportunity to learn or grow, or to get angry and be highly offended. We used to have the notion of agree to disagree. In theological terms, it's known as the doctrine of mutual forbearance. The Niebuhr brothers gave insight into the nuance of this through the trusting and non-trusting person. There's a filter there. In this paradigm, we have the one trying to get away and one trying to conquer the other. But the idea of conquering the other one with love is abhorrent to the one trying to get away. Last week at St. James in Lisa's sermon, she said that no amount of fertilizer or care is going to make the weeds more productive. I was shocked that she said that. In any legal matter, an attempt must be made to restore the injured party and to allow the perpetrator an opportunity to reclaim his honor. God provides the ultimate restoration, and this is the model in our time and in the time to come. We have plenty of knowledge and facts. We don't need to look outside the circle to make this case. In the letter from St. Giles this week, much can be inferred. But if you read the letter at face value, it tells us everything we need to know. In the letter, St. Giles said the shutdown turned the revenue stream at St. Giles off almost overnight, and it had a negative impact on their faith community. It was an honest and adult assessment. It's an assessment of reality. The mechanisms of the pandemic narrative to save lives has had lasting and devastating consequences. We all know what we know. The facts and circumstances of our lives. We're assured of an inheritance. It might not turn out so hot in this life because we can't be paid for something twice. Let's be thankful for that. We're not being paid for offering someone a smile or an encouraging word or showing up in the middle of a crisis. These are the traits of a highly successful and trusting person. No amount of fertilizer or care can make the weeds productive, but God can. And that inheritance thing, well, you can take that to the bank. And you don't need to wait in line at the Northern Trust. You can go right to the head of the line because that's the best place to be. If you would like to join us at Sunday Coffee Hour, Sunday Coffee Hour is every Sunday at 12 noon Central Time on Zoom. I will include my email in the description of this video. I'll be happy to send you an invitation. And I look forward to seeing you very, very soon.